What would someone like you know about business? Derek's voice was a sharp, dismissive laugh as he glanced up from his phone, eyes scanning Rachel, the waitress, like she was invisible. The evening buzzed with the low hum of conversation at La Belle Poche, Manhattan's top-tier restaurant. But Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She was used to the sneers. She was used to being invisible. But this one cut deeper than most. She had worked her fingers to the bone, scrubbing dishes and refilling drinks, barely able to make rent. The place smelled of expensive perfume, freshly popped bottles of champagne, and air thick with the arrogance of people who never worried about paying bills. She moved swiftly, her black apron the only thing that marked her presence. Rachel kept her head low, always cautious, always making sure to stay out of the way. But Derek's voice brought her back to reality. "I'm sorry, sir," she asked, her tone respectful but sharp. "Do you have a suggestion for my portfolio?" he sneered. "Maybe you can tell me what the hell to do with $1 billion, huh?" He leaned back, his chair creaking beneath him, his hand gesturing to the air as if it was a joke. Rachel swallowed, a bitter taste in her mouth. She had never thought she would be in this position again. The position of being underestimated. The position of people thinking she was nothing more than a waitress. Derek wasn't just anyone. He was Derek Williams, one of the wealthiest tech moguls in the country. He didn't need to prove himself. His empire spoke for itself. He owned companies that were worth billions, and the way he sat in that restaurant, surrounded by the elite, made Rachel's stomach turn. She had tried to avoid him all evening, tried to keep herself busy, but now it seemed like fate had other plans. She paused, feeling the weight of his gaze. A cocktail of bitterness and pride simmered inside her. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. She had worked too hard. She had studied too long. "Well, sir," Rachel said, her voice even, but the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. She didn't flinch as she looked him in the eye. "You're overexposed in tech. You need to diversify. Try investing in sustainable energy markets. Africa, Southeast Asia, they're the next big growth areas. Tech is saturated, and you're heading straight for a bubble." Derek's eyebrows shot up, a smirk still on his lips, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Sustainable energy? Are you serious?" he scoffed. "What do you know about that?" Rachel leaned in slightly, the smell of her black coffee mixing with the crisp scent of his expensive cologne. She stood taller, no longer the timid waitress. "I know a lot more than you think," she replied, her voice calm but steady. Derek laughed it off, dismissing her with a shake of his head. He didn't believe her. He couldn't. He had worked his whole life building an empire, and here she was, some woman with no background in business, challenging him. But then she added something that made him pause. "I used to work in finance, sir," Rachel said, her gaze unwavering. "But my mother fell ill. I left to care for her." The words hung in the air between them. Derek blinked. That wasn't what he had expected. "So, you used to be in finance?" he asked, his tone now more curious than mocking. Rachel nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her apron. "Yes, I did," she said quietly. "But I'm happy where I am now, helping people." Derek leaned back, clearly caught off guard. He had expected her to be defensive, or worse, to shrink away from the confrontation. But instead, she stood her ground, her confidence growing with each word. "Tell me more about this strategy," Derek said, his interest piqued despite himself. "How would you even know what to invest in?" Rachel took a breath. "It's not just about the money," she said. "It's about seeing beyond what's right in front of you. It's about being able to predict the future, something you can't do if you only look at the surface." Derek studied her for a moment, his thoughts swirling. He had never met anyone like her before. This wasn't just some waitress who got lucky with an answer. She spoke with the authority of someone who had been in the trenches of high-stakes decisions. "And you think you could do better than my team?" Derek asked, his voice low. Rachel smiled slightly. "I'm not here to compete with anyone, sir. I'm just offering advice." Derek watched her, a mix of disbelief and respect creeping into his expression. For the first time that evening, the billionaire realized he might have underestimated her. But there was something else there too, something he couldn't quite place. And that thought, why would she be working here if she was truly that capable, lingered in his mind as he watched her walk away, leaving him with more questions than answers. What was she hiding? Rachel walked past Derek's table again, her mind still processing their earlier conversation. He hadn't looked at her like that before. The confusion in his eyes had faded, replaced by something else, something deeper. She could feel the weight of his gaze follow her every move. She focused on her task, making sure not to spill the drinks as she weaved through the crowded restaurant. Her heart beat faster with every step. He wasn't just an arrogant billionaire anymore. He was a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. As she approached another table, one of the servers gave her a curious look. "Hey, Rachel, are you all right? You look a little different tonight." Rachel gave her a tight smile, nodding as she adjusted her apron. "Yeah, just tired. It's been a long night." But it wasn't just the long hours. It was Derek. His challenge, his questions, they were still echoing in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her after she spoke. That flicker of curiosity, the shift in his demeanor. It was all so unexpected. "You got this, Rachel," she muttered under her breath. She had been underestimated before. She had dealt with it her whole life. But tonight felt different. As she set down a drink at a nearby table, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Rachel." She turned to find Derek standing at the bar, a phone in his hand. He didn't look like the same man who had mocked her earlier. "I need your help with something," he said, his tone more serious than before. "My team is working on a major acquisition. I'm not sure about it. I want your opinion." Rachel raised an eyebrow. This wasn't the same man who had dismissed her with a laugh. "You want my opinion?" she asked, her voice cautious. "On a multi-million-dollar deal?" Derek nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. I'm starting to think you might be onto something." His words hung in the air, and, for a moment, neither of them spoke. The bustling restaurant around them seemed to quiet in that instant. Rachel couldn't help but feel a rush of something. Maybe it was validation, maybe it was suspicion. Derek had just admitted that she might be right. The man who had dismissed her only hours ago now stood before her, asking for advice. "All right," she said, trying to keep her cool. "I'll take a look at it." Derek handed her the phone, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's a big risk," he said. "I need to know if it's worth it. You've got more experience than you're letting on, Rachel. Help me out here." Rachel hesitated for a moment before accepting the phone. As she read the details of the acquisition on the screen, her mind started to work. This wasn't just a business deal. It was more than that. It was Derek's empire, his reputation, and he was trusting her with it. She could feel the pressure building in her chest. It wasn't just about proving him wrong anymore. This was about something much bigger. "This deal, it's risky, but not for the reasons you think," Rachel said after a few moments. "The market conditions could shift, and the timing is all wrong. But it's not just about the money. There's something off about it. I'd advise against it." Derek's face remained stoic, but she could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Why?" he asked. Rachel looked up from the phone, locking eyes with him. "Because your advisors missed something. They're not seeing the bigger picture. It's not just about the numbers. It's about who you're trusting to make those numbers work." Derek's expression tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Rachel returned the phone to him, her fingers brushing his for a brief moment. "I'd reconsider, if I were you," she added quietly. Derek stood still for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a shift now, a deeper understanding. "I'll take your advice," he said, his voice lower now. "But I want to talk more. There's more to you, isn't there?" Rachel's stomach twisted slightly at the question. He was getting too close, too curious. "Let me know if you want my help with anything else," she said quickly, stepping away from him. As she moved back into the flow of the restaurant, she could feel Derek's gaze still on her. And now, she wasn't so sure she wanted to help him at all. But one thing was for sure, this was far from over. She had opened a door, and she wasn't sure what was going to walk through it next. Rachel walked through the back door of the restaurant, the usual hum of activity muffled by the heavy door closing behind her. Her shift was over, but her mind was still racing. Derek's words echoed in her ears. "I want to talk more. There's more to you, isn't there?" He had caught her off guard. She had never expected him to look at her that way. She had never expected to matter. The weight of his gaze lingered even after she had walked away. She tossed her apron into her locker, fingers lingering on the cold metal. There was something about the way he had looked at her, something in his eyes that hinted at a curiosity she wasn't sure she wanted to explore. It was a vulnerability, unexpected, raw, and it unsettled her. Rachel had spent so many years keeping her life small, hiding the parts of herself that she thought might break her. But Derek had seen through that mask. He had seen her, and it scared her. She grabbed her coat, the cold air outside instantly biting her skin as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Her eyes scanned the busy streets of Manhattan, the city alive with its usual energy. The same energy that made her feel invisible. She had lived in the shadows for so long, in the margins of the life she had once dreamed of. But now, everything was different. Derek had cracked something open, something she wasn't sure she wanted him to see. As she crossed the street, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mom. "How was work, sweetheart? Miss you." Rachel smiled softly, the weight in her chest easing just a little. She had taken on the role of caretaker, not just for her mom's health, but for the stability of the life they had built. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. And she wasn't about to let anyone take that away. She typed a quick reply, "Busy as usual. I'll call you soon, okay?" Her thumb hovered over the send button, but before she could hit it, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. Rachel frowned, tapping it open. It was from Derek. "I've been thinking about what you said. We need to meet. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., my office. I'll have someone arrange it." Rachel froze. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to act so quickly. She had offered him advice in passing, not thinking it would lead to a meeting. But here it was, an invitation. And just like that, everything she had worked so hard to keep separate felt like it was colliding. The small, controlled life she had built with her mom, the fragile wall she had erected to protect herself. Derek was breaking through all of it. She stared at the screen for a long moment, wondering what he really wanted. It wasn't just about business. She knew that much. There was something personal in his tone, something that made her skin prickle with both excitement and fear. She typed back a simple, "Okay," before slipping her phone into her pocket. The world felt different now. Derek wasn't just the arrogant billionaire anymore. He was someone she was going to have to face. The question was, what would happen when she did? As she walked home through the dimly lit streets, Rachel's thoughts raced. She had known for a long time that her life wasn't where she wanted it to be. She had known that her past, the things she had walked away from, would eventually catch up with her. And now, Derek had opened that door. She didn't know what he wanted from her, but she did know one thing. She couldn't walk away from this now. The pieces were falling into place, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming next. But she had no choice. Tomorrow, she would face him. Tomorrow, everything would change. But would it be for better or for worse? Rachel arrived at Derek's office the next afternoon, the building looming in front of her like a fortress. She had walked past it hundreds of times before, but today it felt different. Today, she wasn't just a passing figure. She was stepping into the world of the very people who had always seemed out of reach. The receptionist gave her a polite smile and handed her a visitor badge. "Mr. Williams is expecting you," she said, her voice calm and professional. Rachel nodded, trying to steady the fluttering in her chest. She followed the receptionist down a long hallway, her footsteps echoing in the marble-floored corridor. The walls were adorned with abstract art and polished wood, each piece more expensive than her entire apartment. At the end of the hall, the receptionist knocked softly on a door and opened it. "Rachel Collins," she said, announcing her arrival. Derek stood by his desk, looking every bit the powerful businessman he was. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. "Rachel, thank you for coming," he said, his voice cool. But there was something behind it, a hint of respect? Or was it something else? She wasn't sure. "Please, take a seat." He gestured to the leather chair across from him. As Rachel sat down, she felt the weight of the room press down on her. Everything about this place screamed power, control, and money. It was a world that seemed so far from her own. But here she was. She had earned this moment. "I've been thinking about your advice," Derek said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "I've looked into the deal we discussed. And, well, you were right." Rachel raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You've been checking into it?" she asked, trying to mask the mix of curiosity and caution that washed over her. "Yes," Derek replied, his gaze intense. "I had my team go over the numbers again, and they missed something. A small detail, but it could cost me millions if I'm not careful. You've got an eye for this, Rachel. A sharp one." Rachel shifted in her chair, trying to hide the feeling of triumph swelling inside her. She hadn't expected him to admit it so quickly, but the admission was there, and it was enough. He was acknowledging her, not just as a waitress, but as someone who had knowledge that could make or break a deal. I told you, she said quietly, her tone steady. It's not just about the numbers. It's about seeing the whole picture. Derek nodded slowly, as if processing her words. I'm glad you were here to point that out. But now, there's another thing I need your help with. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Derek hesitated, then slid a thick envelope across the desk toward her. This is a proposal for a new investment strategy. We've got a chance to acquire a major competitor, but there are risks involved. I want your opinion on whether it's worth the price. Rachel glanced at the envelope, but didn't immediately open it. Why me? She asked. You've got a whole team of experts. Derek's eyes locked onto hers. Because your perspective is different. It's not clouded by what everyone else is saying. I've read through your notes from yesterday. There's something about how you think, Rachel. I need that. Rachel's pulse quickened. He was giving her access to the inner workings of his company, to the kind of decision-making that could change everything. But there was still something nagging at her. Why was he trusting her so easily? What was his game? She picked up the envelope, her fingers brushing the thick paper. As she opened it, a few papers fell out. Her eyes scanned the details of the proposed acquisition, her mind already working through the numbers. Then, something caught her eye. There, at the bottom of the proposal, was a clause she hadn't expected. It wasn't a typical financial clause. It was a condition that seemed off. Rachel looked up sharply. This clause, she said, pointing to the document. It's a loophole. You're buying not just the company, but a significant amount of debt that's hidden. It could ruin your entire portfolio. Derek leaned forward, his expression hardening. What do you mean? This clause allows the seller to offload bad debt onto you. It's a common tactic, but if you don't notice it, you're in for a loss, Rachel explained, her voice firm. Derek's jaw clenched as he processed what she was saying. I missed it, he muttered, almost to himself. For the first time, Rachel saw a flicker of vulnerability in him. The powerful CEO was human, after all. I don't know if I would have noticed it if you hadn't pointed it out, he admitted, his voice lower now. Rachel placed the papers back on the desk, her hand brushing over the cold surface. I'm just doing what I do. Seeing the whole picture, she said quietly. Derek nodded, then stood up, walking over to the window. He looked out at the skyline, his back to her. You're more than just a waitress, Rachel, he said, his voice distant. You're not what you seem. And that's unsettling. Rachel felt the weight of his words. She didn't know where this was going, but she could sense that something bigger was unfolding. She had crossed a line now, one that couldn't be undone. Derek turned to face her again, his expression unreadable. I need you to help me, Rachel. On a bigger scale. What do you say? She didn't answer right away. The offer was there, but so were the risks. Was she ready to step into his world? Or was this all just another game he was playing? As she stood up to leave, Derek's words lingered in her mind. What do you say? He had asked. It was a question that would change everything. And Rachel didn't have the answer yet. But she would have to find it soon. Rachel stood in the lobby of Derek's building, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She had spent the night thinking, weighing the pros and cons, but the reality was still sinking in. She had come this far. Now, Derek was waiting for her upstairs, expecting an answer that could change everything. He had made it clear, this was no longer just a casual business proposal. He was offering her a seat at the table, and the offer had come with its own set of strings attached. Rachel, Derek had said over the phone that morning, I'm not just asking you to help me with a few numbers. I'm asking you to take a chance. A big one. This could make you more than just a consultant. It could change your life. She had been silent for a long moment before replying. I don't know, Derek. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But his persistence had been hard to ignore. You're already more ready than you think. You just don't realize it yet. Meet me. We'll talk. And now here she was. Rachel glanced at her watch, 2:55 p.m. 5 minutes. She took a deep breath and stepped into the elevator. The ride to the top floor felt like an eternity. She wasn't sure what she was walking into. She had seen a side of Derek that few people ever got to see. The vulnerability that came when someone was caught off guard, when their ego didn't have all the answers. But she also knew that he was a man used to control. The question now was whether she could keep that control in her hands, or if she would be swept along with the current of his world. The elevator doors opened, and she walked into the expansive office suite. Derek was standing by the window, his back to her. The view of the city stretched out before them, the skyscrapers gleaming in the afternoon light. He didn't turn around at first, but when he spoke, his voice was different. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said, his tone more serious than before. "You were right. This isn't just about numbers. There's more at stake here than I originally thought." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure whether he was admitting weakness or acknowledging her strength. Either way, the stakes were higher now. She stepped forward, keeping her tone steady. "What do you want from me, Derek?" He turned to face her, and this time, there was no mockery in his eyes. No arrogance. Just a man who had realized he needed something he hadn't expected. "I need you to help me with the next step," he said, his gaze steady, almost challenging. "The acquisition? That's just the beginning. The real move comes after. But I can't do it alone. You've already proved you see things others don't. And that's exactly why I need you." Rachel crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing slightly. She could feel the pressure mounting, but something about his sincerity was starting to cut through the walls she had built around herself. She had worked hard to keep her distance from this world, from people like Derek. But now, it was as if her past and present were colliding in the most unexpected way. She took a moment before answering. "What's the catch?" Derek smirked. "There's always a catch, right?" He walked over to his desk, picking up a thick binder and tossing it onto the table in front of her. "This is the full proposal. It's all in there. Financials, strategies, potential outcomes. But there's a wild card. A risky move that could either make us a fortune or crash the whole thing." Rachel opened the binder, flipping through the pages quickly. As she read, her eyes narrowed. This is dangerous. You're asking me to recommend something that could destroy your company." Derek didn't flinch. "I know, but the reward is worth the risk." Rachel looked up, locking eyes with him. "This isn't just about money, is it? This is personal." Derek paused, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, in a low voice, he admitted, "It's about proving that I'm not just some lucky billionaire. I need to prove to myself that I can make the right moves. This is my shot at redemption, Rachel, and I'm not doing it alone." The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. It was the first time she had heard him speak with such raw honesty. But it also made her question everything. Was this just another game for him? Or was there something more at stake here? Rachel closed the binder and stood up, her mind racing. "I'll need time to think about it," she said, her voice steady, though she could feel the pressure building inside her. Derek gave her a small nod. "Take all the time you need. But remember, this isn't just about business. It's about something bigger. And once you're in, there's no turning back." Rachel turned and walked toward the door, her mind in turmoil. She had just been offered a chance to change her life, but the cost was high, and she wasn't sure she was ready to pay it. As she left the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make a decision that would define everything that came after. But one thing was certain: she was no longer the invisible waitress. And no matter how this ended, she wouldn't go back to being the person she had been before. The real question was, what would she do next? Rachel spent the next few days analyzing the proposal Derek had given her, but the weight of the decision kept pressing on her mind. She had never felt more alive, yet more conflicted. Derek's words haunted her. "Once you're in, there's no turning back." She hadn't made up her mind yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with her. As she sat at her small kitchen table, coffee in hand, she flipped through the pages of the binder again, her eyes scanning for any details she had missed before. It was then that she saw it, something small, almost insignificant, hidden within the fine print of the acquisition terms. A condition that tied Derek's company to a series of high-stakes gambling contracts, disguised as strategic investments. Her heart skipped a beat. This was the wild card he had mentioned, but it was much riskier than he had let on. The stakes were higher, much higher. She put the binder down and ran her fingers through her hair, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Derek wasn't just asking her to make a strategic move for the company. He was asking her to be a part of something that could bring down not just his empire, but possibly her own life as well. The pressure was building, but this was the moment she had been waiting for. This was her opportunity to finally take control. She stood up and paced around her tiny apartment, the low hum of the city outside only adding to her sense of urgency. She couldn't let Derek manipulate her, even if the offer was tempting. She had a plan, and it didn't involve being a pawn in his game. As much as he respected her sharp mind, There was something else at play here. He was using her, just as he had done with so many others before. This was bigger than business. She could feel it. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Hey, it's Rachel," she said when the line picked up. "I need your help." The voice on the other end was calm, familiar. "What's going on, Rachel?" The voice belonged to Marcus, her old college friend and a brilliant financial strategist who had made a name for himself in hedge funds. She hadn't spoken to him in months, but she knew he was the only one who could help her make sense of what was happening. "I've been looking over something Derek gave me, and I need you to go over it with me," she said, her voice steady. "It's risky, way riskier than I thought. There's a clause I need you to look at. I think we're missing something." Marcus agreed without hesitation, and they set up a time to meet. Rachel felt a wave of relief. She wasn't going to do this alone. As the days passed, she continued to gather information, working tirelessly, all while keeping up her day job. But she knew something had shifted. Derek had no idea what was coming. The more Rachel uncovered, the more she realized Derek had been underestimating her all along. He thought she was still the same waitress he had mocked when they first met. But he didn't know her history. He didn't know the person she had become. The person who had fought her way through setbacks, who had clawed her way up from nothing, and who wasn't afraid to take on the world. She wasn't going to be another puppet in his game. When she finally met with Marcus, he was just as sharp as she remembered. "You're right. This deal has a lot of moving parts, but there's one thing I don't like about it," he said after reviewing the details. "The gambling contracts aren't just risky, they're designed to fail. If things go south, Derek's going to have a major legal mess on his hands." Rachel's eyes widened. "That's what I thought. So why is he pushing it?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "Because he's in too deep, Rachel. He's already got too much riding on this to back out now. He probably thought you'd go along with it because you're new to this world." Rachel's jaw tightened. "He's wrong. I'm not falling for it. You know what this means, right?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. "It means you've got the leverage now. If you're smart about it, you can turn the tables." Rachel smiled, the weight of her decision suddenly feeling lighter. She had a choice, and now she had the power. "I know what I have to do," she said, her voice firm. As she walked out of the meeting with Marcus, she could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a battle, and she wasn't going to be the one who lost. She had everything she needed to make her move. But the question was, how far was she willing to go? And was Derek ready for what was coming next? Rachel sat in the dimly lit coffee shop, the flickering of the overhead lights almost matching the pounding of her heart. The last few days had been a whirlwind. After meeting with Marcus, she felt the full weight of her decision. The pieces were finally falling into place. But there was one thing she hadn't expected: how much power she had gained, and how little Derek seemed to understand the game he had started. The envelope containing the acquisition proposal lay on the table in front of her. She had taken her time going over the details with Marcus, and now she could see it clearly. Derek was dangerously overextended, but he didn't know that she was onto him. The smart thing would be to let him think she was still in the dark, but Rachel had a different plan. She wasn't just going to play along. She was going to take control. When Derek called her that morning, his voice was colder than usual. "Rachel," he said, "I need to meet with you. This deal needs to be finalized. We can't keep dragging it out." She could sense the urgency in his voice, the tension in the air. He wasn't just pushing for the deal anymore. He was desperate. "I'll be there," she replied, her voice steady, the same calm she had mastered over the past few days. She had learned to play the game well, and now it was her turn to make the first move. At Derek's office, the same receptionist greeted her, but this time Rachel felt different. The pressure she had been carrying was now replaced with a quiet confidence. She wasn't the invisible waitress anymore. She was someone who could change the course of things. Derek's office felt colder than usual. The blinds were drawn, and the air was still. Derek was standing by the window, his posture tense as he stared out over the city. "Rachel," he said without turning around, "we need to finalize everything today. I'm counting on you." Rachel didn't answer right away. She walked into the room, calmly setting her bag down on the chair. "I've looked over the proposal," she said, her voice firm, "and I think it's time you knew what I really think." Derek's shoulders stiffened, and he slowly turned to face her, his eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Rachel continued, taking a step closer to him, "I know about the gambling contracts. The ones you've been hiding. The ones that could bring everything crashing down. For a moment, Derek didn't speak. His face went pale, but he quickly masked it with a forced smirk. I don't know what you're talking about. Rachel shook her head. Don't play me, Derek. I know what you've been doing. You thought I wouldn't see it, but I did. And now, I'm telling you, I'm not going to be a part of this. Derek's eyes darkened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine anger in him. You think you have control here, Rachel? He spat, his voice rising. You think you can just walk away from this deal after everything I've done for you? After everything I've trusted you with? Rachel stood her ground, her heart racing but her mind clear. You've trusted me because you think I'm just another pawn in your game. But I'm not. I've been helping you because I wanted to, but now, I'm helping myself. And I'm done with your lies. Derek took a step forward, his presence suddenly more imposing. But Rachel didn't flinch. She was no longer afraid of him. He was the one who had been underestimating her all along. You don't understand, Derek said, his voice low and dangerous. I've worked my whole life to get here. This deal is everything to me. If you walk away now, everything I've built, everything, will be gone. Rachel's eyes softened, but only for a moment. She had no sympathy left for him. Maybe it's time you built something that actually lasts, instead of gambling it all away, she said, her words cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. Derek's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Rachel. You're not just walking away from me. You're walking away from everything I can give you. Rachel's lips curled into a small smile, the first real smile she had given him in days. I don't need your money, Derek. I don't need your empire. I just need to know that I'm doing what's right for me. Derek took a step back, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and disbelief. He didn't know what to say. The power had shifted. For the first time, Rachel felt the balance tip in her favor. She had the leverage now. I'm leaving, Derek, she said, her voice steady. But I'll be watching. I'll be watching you fall. As she turned to leave, she could hear him call out behind her. You can't walk away from this. You're making a mistake you'll regret. But Rachel didn't look back. She had already made her decision. She was done with Derek's world. But what she didn't know was that Derek wasn't going to let her walk away that easily. The real game was just beginning. And he wasn't done with her yet. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, the sound of the coffee brewing. The only thing breaking the silence. She had walked away from Derek's offer, but something in her gut told her the real fight was only just beginning. For days, she had tried to focus on her work, to bury herself in her daily life. But the tension she had left behind with Derek was impossible to shake. He had underestimated her, but she had underestimated him in return. That much was clear now. The first move had been hers. She had walked away, and Derek had let her go. But she could feel it. He wasn't done yet. The question was, what was he planning? She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Marcus. I'm hearing rumors about Derek's next move. He's pushing forward with the acquisition regardless. He's already started reaching out to other investors. This isn't over. Rachel's heart raced. Of course Derek would keep going. She knew he was too proud to admit defeat. But what did that mean for her? Had she really walked away from everything without realizing what it could cost? She put the phone down and leaned back in her chair, the weight of the decision now sitting heavier than ever. The door to her apartment creaked open, and her mom stepped in, holding a bag of groceries in her arms. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? Rachel forced a smile. Yeah, just thinking. Busy day. Her mom set the bags down and sat across from her, looking at Rachel with concern. You've been working a lot lately. Are you sure you're not burning yourself out? Rachel shrugged. It's nothing I can't handle. But inside, she knew her mom could see through the facade. What's really going on? Her mom pressed. Rachel hesitated, the familiar tug of guilt pulling at her. She had kept her personal life from her mom for a reason. It's business stuff. A big decision. I'm just figuring it out. Her mom studied her for a long moment before speaking. Whatever it is, just remember, you don't have to carry it alone. Rachel nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to tell her everything, but she couldn't. Not yet. She couldn't risk pulling her mom into this. Not when Derek's world was just starting to close in on her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from an unknown number. Hello? She answered, bracing herself. Rachel, it's Derek, came the voice on the other end. Her stomach dropped. We need to talk. She swallowed hard. What do you want, Derek? I know you think you've made your decision, but I'm offering you one last chance, he he said, his tone smooth, but there was a hint of urgency behind it. This is bigger than you think. You're not just walking away from a deal. You're walking away from a future. My future. Rachel clenched her fists. I've already made my choice. Have you? Derek's voice was laced with something darker. Because I'm hearing rumors about your little friend Marcus. I know he's been feeding you information, Rachel. But what you don't know is that he's got his own agenda. He's playing you. Rachel froze. What are you talking about? Marcus is working with my competitors. He's trying to get in on this deal through back channels. You've been feeding him information, but you're not the only one in the game. The phone felt heavy in her hand as she processed his words. Derek wasn't just bluffing, he knew something. And suddenly, the ground beneath her feet felt less stable than it ever had. You're lying, Rachel said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. Am I? Go ahead. Call Marcus. See what you find. Derek's voice turned colder. But remember this, if you want to keep playing with the big boys, you have to know who you're really working with. He hung up before she could say another word. Rachel sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, her mind racing. Was Derek right? Had she been blind to Marcus's motives all along? She hadn't trusted Derek completely, but could she trust Marcus? He had been her ally, her confidant. But Derek had just given her a piece of information that turned everything upside down. She grabbed her phone again, this time dialing Marcus's number. The ringing felt endless. When he finally picked up, Rachel didn't waste time. We need to talk, she said, her voice tight. Now. As the line went silent, she could feel the stakes rising higher. Derek had made his move, and now, it was her turn to figure out where Marcus's loyalties truly lay. But was she prepared for the truth? Rachel sat at the edge of her bed, the phone still clutched in. Her hand after the conversation with Marcus. She had told him to meet her, but now, sitting in the quiet of her apartment, she wasn't sure what she was walking into. Derek had pushed her into a corner with his accusations, and Marcus had played the game just as she had. So what made her think he wasn't playing a deeper game of his own? The stakes had been raised, but Rachel hadn't made a decision yet. There was something in the way Derek had spoken that felt like a threat wrapped in a challenge, and she wasn't going to let him win. Her mind raced with possibilities. She needed time to think, time to assess what was really happening before she made a move. The pressure she had felt earlier now seemed more like a quiet hum beneath the surface. Derek was moving fast, too fast. He thought he had her where he wanted her, but what if she was the one pulling the strings? The clock on her wall ticked steadily. Rachel's gaze moved to the proposal on the desk across from her. The binder still lay open, its contents more revealing than she had initially realized. There was a clause that Derek hadn't noticed, and Marcus hadn't either. Something hidden in the layers of financial jargon that could be used to completely undermine the deal if she wanted. She had been playing her role well, but this was the moment she had been preparing for. She didn't need to rush. She just needed to wait. The next day, she met Marcus at a local cafe. He was already sitting at a corner table, his laptop open in front of him, typing something quickly as she approached. You're late, he said without looking up, but there was no heat behind his words, only the usual cool professionalism. Rachel slid into the chair across from him. We need to talk, she said, her voice steady. Marcus didn't stop typing. About what? Derek's mess? It's already starting to unravel. She leaned in slightly. You're wrong, she said quietly. This isn't just Derek's mess. It's ours. Marcus stopped typing and looked up, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? I mean, this whole thing was never just about the acquisition. It's about power, Rachel said, her voice low but firm. Derek is too focused on his empire, and you? Well, you've been playing both sides. But you missed something. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. What did I miss? Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a moment to reach into her bag and pull out the proposal, sliding it across the table toward him. The clause at the end, she said, pointing to the specific line. It's a ticking time bomb. If I pull the right strings, I can expose it and take Derek down before he even realizes what's happening. Marcus's eyes scanned the paper quickly, his fingers pausing as they hovered over the text. How long have you known about this? He asked, looking back at her, his voice a mix of surprise and respect. Long enough to know it's not just about money anymore, Rachel replied. I've been waiting for the right time to make my move, and I think now is it. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're serious, aren't you? He asked. Rachel didn't flinch. You think I'm playing? This isn't about some petty game. This is about getting control of the situation. Marcus sat back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on her. You know what this means, right? If we go through with this, there's no turning back. Derek won't let this slide. I know, Rachel said, her voice steady. But that's exactly what I want. There was a shift in the air between them. Something unspoken, a shift in power. Marcus wasn't in control anymore, and he knew it. Rachel had taken the upper hand. She wasn't the same person who had walked into Derek's office months ago, unsure and uncertain. Now, she was the one with the leverage. As they sat in silence, Rachel felt a sense of calm wash over her. This was it. She had set her plan into motion, and now it was all about execution. There were risks, yes, but the payoff would be worth it. She was ready for whatever came next. I'll set everything up, Marcus said finally, his tone grudgingly respectful. But you'd better be ready for what happens after this. I'm ready, Rachel replied. She stood up, looking down at him. This game is over, Marcus. And I'm the one who's going to win. As she turned to leave, she felt a small sense of satisfaction settle over her. She had kept her cards close, but now she was revealing them, one by one. Derek and Marcus had thought they had the upper hand. But it was Rachel's turn now. The next move was hers. And she wasn't about to let them forget that. Rachel stood outside Derek's office building, the air brisk against her skin as she waited for the elevator to arrive. Her pulse was steady, but her mind was racing. Everything had led to this moment. Every decision, every move, had brought her here. She had played the long game, kept her distance, and now, she had Derek right where she wanted him. But as the elevator doors opened and she stepped inside, the weight of what was about to unfold hit her like a wave. She had gone over the plan with Marcus countless times, but now that she was about to make the final move, she couldn't ignore the gravity of it all. There was no turning back. Derek had trusted her. He thought she was just another pawn in his game. But now, she was the one with the upper hand. The elevator dinged as it reached the top floor, and Rachel stepped out into the sleek, modern lobby. She walked toward Derek's office, her steps purposeful, her eyes focused. She didn't hesitate as the receptionist greeted her. Mr. Williams is expecting you, the receptionist said with a smile, directing her to the glass doors at the end of the hallway. Rachel didn't smile back. She didn't need to. She had already won. Inside Derek's office, he was waiting for her, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city. The same view that had once made him feel untouchable. Now, it was a reminder of everything he had built, and everything that was about to fall apart. You came, Derek said, his voice cool, but there was an edge to it. He wasn't happy to see her. Not anymore. I told you I would, Rachel replied, her voice calm, but firm. She stepped forward, meeting his gaze with steady confidence. I've reviewed everything, Derek. The clause, the contracts, everything. It's a mess, and it's all falling apart. Derek turned slowly, his face hardening. So, what do you want from me? He asked, his tone sharp. Do you want money? A seat at the table? Because I've already told you, I don't want anything from you. Rachel interrupted, her voice unwavering. What I want is for you to face the truth. You've been using everyone, manipulating situations to get what you want. But now, you're exposed. You don't control the narrative anymore. I do. Derek's eyes narrowed, the anger in them barely contained. You think you can bring me down with one move? You've got nothing, Rachel. You're just a waitress who got lucky. You're wrong, Rachel said, stepping closer. I'm more than just a waitress. And you've underestimated me from the start. I've been watching you, Derek. I've been planning every step, and now, it's time for you to face the consequences. Derek clenched his jaw, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. He knew he was losing control. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out the folder containing the final piece of evidence. Proof of the hidden debts, the risky contracts, the secret deals that Derek had tried to sweep under the rug. She placed it on the desk in front of him. This is what you've been hiding, Derek. This is what's going to bring everything down. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done. Derek's face went pale as he stared at the documents in front of him. For the first time, he didn't have an answer. The powerful, confident man who had always been in control was now backed into a corner. Rachel watched him, her expression calm. She had him. She knew it, and he knew it too. Derek opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. He was powerless. You won't get away with this, he finally muttered. Rachel shook her head slowly. You're wrong again. You already lost. She turned to leave, but Derek's voice stopped her. You think you've won? This isn't over, Rachel. There's more at stake here than you realize. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. I know exactly what's at stake, she said, her voice low. But you don't. And with that, she walked out, leaving Derek standing there, defeated. She had made her move. The game had changed. And now, the real consequences were just beginning. Rachel sat across from Marcus at the small, dimly lit cafe. The mug of coffee in front of her had long gone cold, but her focus remained sharp. She hadn't slept much the past few days, her mind constantly running through every detail of her plan. Derek had played his hand, but now it was time for her to play hers. And this time, there would be no more second chances. She wasn't about to let him worm his way out of this. Marcus glanced at her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. So, what's the next move? You've got the proof, but Derek's still got a lot of connections. He's not the type to go down quietly. Rachel's lips curled into a faint smile. I'm not worried about him making noise. What I'm worried about is making sure everyone knows the truth. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table toward him. This is it. The full set of records. The real proof. Marcus opened the folder slowly, his eyes scanning the documents. His face remained unreadable, but Rachel could see the shift in his expression as he read through the pages. Where did you get this? He asked quietly, looking up at her with new understanding. Doesn't matter, Rachel replied, her voice steady. What matters is that it's all here. The offshore accounts, the false invoices, the hidden debts. Derek's entire operation is built on lies. I've been sitting on this for days, waiting for the right moment. Now is that moment. Marcus took a deep breath. This changes everything, he said, his voice quieter than before. We can't just throw this out there. Derek will come for us. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes cold but focused. I'm not just throwing it out there. I'm making sure it gets to the right people. The people who'll make sure this goes public. This isn't just about Derek anymore. This is about everyone he's wronged, everyone he's used to climb to the top. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You've really thought this through, haven't you? He asked, almost as if in disbelief. Rachel nodded slowly. I've been thinking about this for a long time, Marcus. I've been watching, learning. I've been waiting for Derek to make a mistake, and he has. Marcus picked up his phone and tapped it a few times, then looked at Rachel. You're going to need a team to move on this. A media team, a lawyer. Hell, you might need protection. Rachel's eyes hardened. I don't need anyone to protect me, Marcus. I've got everything I need right here. She patted the folder in front of her. And as for a team, I've already got one in mind. She stood up, her movements measured and calm. Derek's arrogance is his downfall. He thinks he's untouchable, but once this gets out, there's no going back. Marcus watched her closely. You're really going through with this, aren't you? Rachel met his gaze. I have to. I've been in his shadow for too long. It's time to step into the light. She walked out of the cafe, the cool evening air filling her lungs as she stepped onto the sidewalk. As she walked, she pulled her phone out and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. It was time to call in a favor. A big one. The phone rang 3 times before the voice on the other end answered. Rachel. It was Jack, a former colleague she hadn't spoken to since her days working at a financial firm. I need you to do something for me, she said, her voice low but steady. I need you to leak something. There was a brief pause on the other end. Leak something? Rachel, what the hell are you talking about? I've got evidence, Jack. Evidence that'll take down one of the biggest players in the game, she said, her voice calm. I need you to make sure it gets to the right people. The media, the authorities. This has to go public, and it has to go fast. Jack was silent for a moment. You've got the goods? You're serious about this? I'm dead serious, she replied. This is bigger than you or me. It's about taking down someone who thinks they're untouchable. Jack sighed. I'll make it happen. But this is going to be huge, Rachel. Once it's out there, there's no going back. Rachel smiled, a sense of finality washing over her. I know. That's exactly the point. She hung up the phone and took a deep breath. The pieces were finally in place. Derek had no idea what was coming for him. But she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. As she walked into the night, the sound of her footsteps echoed in the quiet streets. The world was about to change, and she was the one making it happen. But one thing still nagged at her. What would Derek do when the truth finally came? Crashing down? Rachel stared at the screen of her phone, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had never felt so vulnerable in her life. Her breath was shallow, her chest tight as the weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her. The decision she had been avoiding for months now felt inevitable, but it still terrified her. She had built so many walls around herself, so many reasons to keep people at a distance. She couldn't afford to let them in. Not again. Not after everything. But then her phone buzzed in her hand, her mother's name flashing on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat, and she swiped to answer. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Rachel, I just wanted to check on you. You've been so distant lately, and I don't like it. What's going on?" Her mother's voice was soft but filled with concern, a concern that Rachel couldn't ignore. But she had no words for her mother. The guilt was suffocating her. She had been shutting her out, ignoring her, because she hadn't been able to face the hurt she had caused. Rachel had been selfish, driven by her own fears and ambitions. "I've been busy, Mom," Rachel said, her voice quiet. "I know you've been busy, sweetheart, but you've always been there for me. And I'm here for you, too. Whenever you're ready to talk, you know I'll listen." The words hit Rachel like a ton of bricks. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears. Her mother had always been there for her, no matter what. But Rachel hadn't been there for her. Not the way she should have. Not the way she needed to be. The last time they had truly connected, she had been wrapped up in her own world, too focused on building something, on proving herself, to recognize the pain her mother was going through. A flashback hit her, one she had tried to push out of her mind for so long. She remembered the argument. Her mother, frail and weak, sitting in that chair, asking Rachel to stay, to help her more, to spend time with her. Rachel had brushed her off. "I don't have time, Mom. I need to focus on this. I need to make something of myself. I'll be back later." Her mother had tried to hide the disappointment in her eyes, but Rachel saw it. She saw it and still walked away. The memory cut deeper than she expected. It was the first time Rachel had ever felt like she was truly failing her mother. And she had kept running. Running from the reality that she was always too busy to be there when it mattered. The phone call ended, and Rachel was left staring at the screen. The words that she had been trying to avoid, the apology she had been running from, now felt like a knot in her throat. She wasn't sure if she could fix it, but she knew she had to try. Taking a deep breath, she finally started typing. It took her a few minutes to put her thoughts into words, but the moment she hit send, something inside her shifted. She had made the first step. "Mom, I'm sorry. I've been selfish, and I've hurt you. I've been too focused on everything else to see what really matters. I love you, and I'm here. Always." As soon as she pressed send, her heart raced. She didn't know what to expect, what her mother's response would be. But the words were out there now, and she had no choice but to face them. The phone buzzed almost immediately. Her mother's message popped up. "I love you too, sweetheart. We'll figure it out together." A single tear fell down Rachel's cheek. She had never felt so vulnerable, so raw. But it felt like the first step towards something real, towards healing. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of her mother's words wash over her. But as she wiped the tear away, she knew that the next step would be even harder. Derek was still out there, and the game wasn't over. She had made her peace with her mother, but now she had to make peace with herself. There was one last thing to do. One last piece of the puzzle to put into place. And it was time to face it head on. As she stood up, her phone buzzing again, she knew what she had to do. It was time to take back control. And this time, she wasn't going to back down. Rachel stood at the hospital corridor, her heart racing. She had just received the call that her mother's condition had worsened. Her hands trembled as she walked down the sterile, white hallway. The low hum of the fluorescent lights above echoed in her ears, but it didn't drown out the frantic beating of her heart. She had been away too long, too caught up in everything else. She should have been there. She should have been there when it mattered. She reached her mother's room, the door slightly ajar, and for a moment, she hesitated. The guilt threatened to swallow her whole. But then, she pushed the door open, stepping inside. Her mother was lying in bed, pale and weak, but when she saw Rachel, a faint smile crossed her face. It was all Rachel needed. She rushed to her side, taking her mother's frail hand in her own. "Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here now," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. Her mother's fingers tightened around hers, weak but there. She could feel the tremor in her mother's hand, the effort it took for her to squeeze back. "I've missed you, sweetheart," her mother said, her voice raspy but filled with love. "I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she leaned forward, her forehead resting gently on her mother's hand. "No, Mom. It's me. I'm the one who should have been there." Her voice cracked, the weight of everything, her choices, her mistakes, finally coming to the surface. The years of pushing her away, of chasing success at the cost of the most important thing in her life, her mother. And yet, despite it all, here she was. Her mother was still holding on, still offering her love. "You've always been there for me," Rachel whispered, her chest tightening with emotion. Her mother slowly lifted her hand to Rachel's cheek, her touch soft but steady. "And I'll always be here for you. I've never stopped." The words shattered Rachel. She felt a rush of emotion, a tidal wave of regret and love that washed over her. She buried her face in her mother's hand, tears flowing freely now. In this moment, all the walls she had built for herself came crumbling down. The love her mother had always given her, unconditional, unwavering, was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything," Rachel sobbed. Her mother smiled softly, a tear slipping from her own eye. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Rachel took a deep breath, wiping her eyes. Her mother's words, her touch, everything was a balm to the wounds Rachel had carried for so long. She didn't know how much time they had, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never take her mother's love for granted again. Just then, the door opened behind them, and a nurse stepped in. She smiled kindly, but Rachel could see the quiet sadness in her eyes. The nurse gave a small nod and stepped back, allowing the family a moment of peace. Rachel stayed with her mother, holding her hand, her heart full. For the first time in so long, she felt at peace. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew she would never let the most important things slip away again. She would make things right. She would be there for the people who mattered, the people who loved her no matter what. As her mother's steady breathing filled the room, Rachel whispered softly, "I love you, Mom. Always." And in that moment, she finally believed it. Her mother's love was her healing. And this time, she wasn't going to let it slip away.